After 70, something shifts. It's not just the body that slows down. It's the mind, the expectations, the endless need to get things right. We spend so much of our lives trying to be perfect. The perfect parent, the perfect spouse, the perfect version of ourselves. But one day you wake up and peace feels more valuable than perfection ever did. That quiet moment with your morning coffee, the sound of birds, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, that's enough. In this episode of Elderly Reflections, we're not chasing perfect anymore. We're choosing peace, always. I'll share stories, wisdom from real seniors, and maybe, just maybe, help you see aging in a way that brings comfort instead of fear. And hey, if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. There's a lot more life ahead of us, and I'd love for you to walk through it together. You know, there's something I wish someone had told me when I turned 70, and it's this. Your house doesn't need to be spotless, but your spirit does. I mean it. For most of my life, I believed keeping things perfectly in place was a sign of respectability. I was raised in a small town in Pennsylvania, the kind where people notice if your hedge is a little overgrown or your curtains aren't ironed. My father used to say, a man's porch is a window into his soul. And I took that to heart. Every Saturday, I waxed the floor until it shined. Every evening, I fluffed the pillows like a showroom. It became a ritual, a routine, a religion even. But over time, I started to notice something strange. My home was quiet, spotless, yes, but also lifeless. Not because it lacked love, but because I was too busy chasing perfection to welcome in the messiness of living. Then I met Ruth. Ruth was 82 when I first visited her. She lived in a tiny little home in the outskirts of Manchester, England. The place looked like a catalog. She had doilies on every surface and glass figurines lined up in perfect rows. But Ruth had a broken hip when we met. She had slipped on her freshly polished hardwood floor. I asked her how she was doing, and she looked at me with a tired smile and said, I spent 20 years polishing my silver, but I never once sat down and played tea party with my granddaughter. I was too afraid of the crumbs. That hit me like a brick. I could hear the regret in her voice. I was measuring my days by how clean my counters were, not by how present I was. You see, after 70, something shifts. You start noticing what really holds meaning. The sound of your grandchild's laughter echoing through a messy hallway. The joy of baking cookies and not caring if flour ends up in your hair. The warmth of having someone sit with you in a room that's not perfect, but feels like home. I started changing little things. I stopped rushing to clean up as soon as guests left. I started leaving the dishes until morning so I could sit and talk longer. And you know what happened? I felt lighter, freer. My home became a place of life again. Not a museum. Don't get me wrong, I still like things tidy, but now I know there's a difference between clean and cold. A house can be neat and still be empty. What matters more is the peace inside you. Are you relaxed? Are you connected? Are you living or just maintaining? I'll tell you something else. A friend of mine, Charles, he's 78, lives alone in New Hampshire. He used to obsess over his lawn, mowed it every 3 days, had the greenest grass on the block. But last year, his daughter visited with her 2 kids. They ran through the yard, picking dandelions, building little mud castles. When they left, the lawn was a mess. I asked Charles if he was upset. He just chuckled and said, that's the happiest my yard's ever been. That's what I'm talking about. You reach a point in life where you stop worrying about appearances and start protecting peace. Where the scuff marks on the floor tell stories and the fingerprints on the glass mean you weren't alone. So if you're listening to this and you're still running yourself ragged trying to keep everything in order, I want to say this to you, gently but firmly. Let it go. Let the house be lived in. Let the sofa cushions sag a little. Let the dining table carry the marks of memories. And let your spirit breathe. Because nobody at your funeral is going to say she kept her kitchen spotless. But they might say she made me feel welcome. After 70, that's the legacy that matters, not perfection. Now let me tell you the second truth I've learned after 70. And this one's important. People judge you far less than you think. And love you far more than you realize. You know, for most of my life, I tried hard to look like I had it all together. Polished shoes, polite conversation, don't speak unless spoken to. You know the type. I thought if I looked respectable, people would treat me better. But now I know something different. People don't fall in love with perfection, they fall in love with presence. They want real, not rehearsed. And that brings me to the first point under this truth. We hide too much of ourselves out of fear of being misunderstood. I remember a man named Frank, a retired mechanic from Minnesota. Big hands, quiet soul. After his wife passed, he joined a book club at the community center, trying to keep busy. Every week he sat in the back, nodded, smiled, never spoke. I finally asked him why. He looked at the floor and said, "I ain't talked books since high school. Don't want to sound like a fool." That stopped me cold. Here was a man who rebuilt carburetors, raised a family through hard winters, and he still felt unworthy of being heard. I told him, "Frank, it's not about sounding smart. It's about being here." The next week he read aloud a Robert Frost poem, stumbled a bit, voice shook, but afterward folks clapped, not politely, genuinely. And Frank, he smiled for the first time in weeks. He leaned over to me and whispered, "Maybe I'm not too old to be known after all." That brings me to the second point. We overestimate how much people notice and underestimate how deeply they feel us. I met Dolores, a 76-year-old from Tennessee who loved to wear bright colors. Turquoise scarves, red glasses, purple shoes. She told me, "When I was younger, I dressed plain so folks wouldn't talk. Now I dress loud so they won't forget me." One day someone said her outfit was a bit much. I asked how she felt. She laughed and said, "If I got a fade, I'll do it in color." That kind of boldness is beautiful. And guess what? More people loved Dolores than judged her. Her courage made others feel free too. You see, when you show up as you are, you don't push people away. You invite them closer. Now, the third point is this. The opinions we fear most often belong to people who don't matter in the end. I had a neighbor named Harold. He was 81 and still refused to use a cane, even though his knees were shot. One afternoon I asked him, "Why don't you get a cane, man?" He grunted and said, "Because I don't want folks thinking I'm fragile." I said, "Harold, you're not fooling anyone limping around like a cowboy. You're making it harder on yourself." He stared for a minute, then sighed. "You know what? You're right. Pride's a heavy load." The next week he showed up to church with a cane, bright blue with a duck head handle. He walked slower but smiled wider, said to me, "Turns out no one cared, but my back sure does." Isn't that something? The people we think will mock us rarely do. They're too busy carrying their own stuff to bother judging ours. And those who do judge, their words don't feed your soul. Their opinions don't pay your bills. Their approval isn't your oxygen. So let it go. Last point I'll share under this truth is the one I carry closest. You earn your right to be seen the moment you stop trying to impress and start trying to connect. There's a woman named Esther I once met in a park in Ohio, 83, wrinkled hands, sharp eyes. She sat beside me on a bench and said, out of nowhere, "You know what makes you unforgettable?" I said, "What?" She said, "Not your stories, not your looks, not even your wisdom. It's how you make people feel like they matter. That's what stays." That stuck with me, still does. You see, after 70, you begin to realize something profound. You don't need to be impressive. You just need to be sincere. You don't need to be loud. You just need to be honest. Now let me tell you what really changed things, not just for me, but for some good folks I've known along the way. Because here's the truth. After 70, peace doesn't just knock on the door. You've got to make room for it. You've got to clear out all the perfection you've been carrying for decades and say, "You know what? This is enough." But how do we do that? How do we actually live peace when the world taught us to chase performance? Well, I've seen it happen. It starts with the simplest thing, learning to slow down and actually notice what's around you. My friend Alice, she's 86 now, lives in Vermont in this cozy white cottage with blue shutters. Every morning she sits on her porch in the same rocking chair, wrapped in the same knitted shawl, holding a cup of Earl Grey. She doesn't check the news, doesn't scroll a phone. She just sits, listens to the wind in the trees, watches the light shift across her garden. When I asked her once if she ever felt lonely out there, all by herself, she looked at me and smiled. Said, "Lonely? No, I'm just paying attention." That's all I ever really needed. That right there is the first lesson. Sometimes what we call emptiness is just unpracticed presence. When we start noticing the world again, even in its quiet, we find we've been surrounded by beauty this whole time. The next lesson is just as important. Stop apologizing for resting. After 70, your body speaks in a different language. It's softer, but wiser. You can ignore it, or you can listen and live longer. My friend Paul, back in Arizona, used to be a high school principal. Ran that place like a ship. After he retired, he couldn't sit still. He told me once, "I felt like if I wasn't moving, I was wasting time." But over the years, his heart gave a few warnings. Now every day around 2 o'clock, he closes the blinds, lays on the couch, and naps. And he doesn't call it laziness. He calls it what it is. Board meetings with my soul. That's how he puts it, and guess what? He's happier, sharper, more relaxed than he's been in years. At our age, rest isn't a weakness. It's wisdom. And peace? Peace is when you stop needing permission to listen to what your body already knows. Third, and this one's personal for a lot of folks, learn to say no, without guilt, without 15 explanations. No is a complete sentence. I knew a woman named June, 79, lives in New Jersey. Her family invited her on a big cruise through the Mediterranean last summer. 12 days, 5 countries, lots of walking, lots of noise. She smiled and said, "I love y'all, but my knees don't speak Italian." She stayed home. Instead, she baked her famous peach cobbler and mailed one to each of her grandkids. They called her from the ship, mouths full, thanking her for the best part of the trip. She told me later, "At this age, I only go where the peace is louder than the pressure." That's powerful, isn't it? Choosing peace over obligation, choosing soft days over packed schedules. That's the kind of strength you earn, not the kind you show off. Now, another way we find peace after 70 is by doing things that make us lose track of time. Something just for us. No praise, no points, just pure presence. For me, that's woodworking. I could stand in my shed for hours, shaping something out of nothing. For others, it's painting. For some, it's gardening. For others, it's walking until the soul quiets down. There was this man, Leon, 91, Korean War veteran, lives with his daughter in Ohio. Every morning, rain or shine, he sits at his kitchen table with a box of watercolors, paint whatever bird he sees out the window. Robins, sparrows, cardinals. I asked him why birds, and he said, "Because they don't worry about what people think. They just sing and go." Then he added, "And every time I paint, I forget how old I am." That's the power of creating, of getting lost in the moment. That's where peace lives, in the places where the clock disappears and your heart speaks louder than your head. But the biggest shift, the most important one, comes when we finally forgive ourselves for not becoming who we thought we would be. All of us had dreams. Some worked out, some didn't. And for a while, we carried that like a shadow. But at some point, peace comes when we say, "That version of me may be gone, but what's here now is still worthy of love." Clara is one of the wisest women I've ever known. She's 82, grew up in North Carolina, always wanted to be a nurse. She told me, "I used to daydream about wearing the white coat, walking hospital halls, helping people." But life had other plans. She married young, had 5 kids, worked part-time cleaning houses, never got that degree. For years, she felt like she let herself down. Then one night, her eldest daughter, now a doctor, gave a speech at a medical gala. She said, "I became a healer because my mother showed me what it looked like." She didn't have a title, but she had love. Clara cried when she told me that story. She said, "I didn't fail my dream, I just fulfilled it in a different form." That kind of realization, that's what peace tastes like. And you only find it when you stop comparing your life to the one you planned and start honoring the one you lived. Another thing we must learn if we want peace is how to release regret. Some people think regret is a sign of honesty. Maybe it is, but holding on to it forever, that's not noble. That's just heavy. I had a neighbor once, George, spent the last 10 years of his life beating himself up over an argument with his brother. They hadn't spoken in 2 decades. Then one day he said to me, "I kept waiting for the right time to apologize, but I think I missed it." So he wrote a letter, not asking for forgiveness, just offering peace. Mailed it, he never got a reply. But you know what he told me? "The moment I dropped it in the mailbox, I felt lighter, and that was enough." You see, not all peace comes from fixing. Some comes from releasing. And finally, the last thing I'll say here is this. Peace after 70 often begins with gratitude. Not the kind you post about, not the kind you write on a list, the quiet kind. The kind that shows up when you put your feet on the floor in the morning and say, "Thank you, legs." The kind that whispers, "I'm still here," when you look in the mirror and see time's fingerprints on your face. My friend Roberto from Naples, he told me, "I thank my coffee every morning before I drink it, because it's still warm, and so am I." That man has nothing in his fridge but olives and humor, and he's one of the most peaceful souls I've met. So if you're wondering where to begin, start there, with the things that still work, still move, still comfort you. Because peace, in the end, isn't found in a silent home, or a perfect schedule, or a flawless body. It's found in the small things. A warm mug, a kind face, a walk without pain, a heart without noise, and if you have even one of those today, then peace is already here. So, here we are, friend. After 70, we don't need perfection. We need peace. And the truth is, peace doesn't come from having everything in place. It comes from letting go, slowing down, and accepting ourselves as we are. You've lived enough, learned enough, and loved enough to deserve quiet mornings, soft days. If this reflection meant something to you, share it. Not just the words, share the feeling. And before you go, tell me, where are you watching from? Leave a comment below, and if Elderly Reflection feels like home to you, go ahead and subscribe. I'd be honored to sit with you again next time.